I'm going to spend the next few minutes walking through the Leica SL3 and helping you decide whether it's the right tool for the work you want to do, without any of the usual hype. If you're on the fence because you've heard it's a camera for pros but you're not sure what that means for your day-to-day, I'll break down the practical moments where it shines and where it might leave you wishing for something else. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of hesitation most people feel when they see a Leica on the price tag. The brand carries a legacy of precision, but that also means the price can feel like a gamble if you haven't actually tested the camera in the field. The biggest risk is buying a system that feels great on paper but ends up being a mismatch for the types of shoots you do, whether that's low-light events, on-the-go video, or a studio workflow that relies heavily on lens swaps. That's why I'm focusing on real-world behavior, how the autofocus works when you're chasing a moving subject, how the sensor handles a dimly lit venue, and whether the battery holds up during a long day of shooting. The Leica SL3 is built around a 60-megapixel full-frame sensor paired with Leica's Maestro IV processor. In plain English, you get a lot of detail and a processor that can keep up with that detail, even when you're shooting stills at 60 MP and pulling 8K video in the same session. The sensor's resolution is a clear advantage if you frequently crop or print large-format work, because you'll retain fine detail where many 24MP cameras would start to look soft. On the flip side, that high resolution can be a double-edged sword. File sizes balloon quickly, which means you'll need a robust storage workflow and a computer that can handle the processing load without slowing you down. If your workflow already involves a fast SSD array and you're comfortable managing large raw files, the extra resolution is a real win. If you're more of a shoot and share on social kind of photographer, you might find the extra data unnecessary and the storage costs add up. Autofocus on the SL3 is a hybrid system, mixing phase detect pixels with contrast detection across the entire frame. In practice, this translates to a confidence boost when you're tracking subjects that move unpredictably. Think kids at a birthday party or a street performer weaving through a crowd. I tested the camera on a local jazz gig where the stage lights were flickering and the musicians were constantly shifting positions. The AF held onto the saxophonist's face without hunting, and the focus transition stayed smooth even as the lighting changed from warm stage wash to a brief spotlight. That reliability is a practical strength for event shooters who can't afford to waste time refocusing manually. Low-light performance is another common worry with high-resolution sensors, because you often have to raise the ISO to get a usable exposure. The SL3 sensor, combined with the Maestro IV processor, keeps noise surprisingly low up to about ISO 6400. In a dimly lit restaurant scenario I tried, the images kept a clean look, and the colors stayed natural without the heavy post-processing you sometimes need with other bodies. However, the camera's native ISO range tops out at 5000, expandable to 1005000, and while the extended range is usable, you'll start to see the grain creep in at those extremes. If you regularly shoot concerts or night cityscapes where you're pushing ISO 12800 or higher, you might want to compare this performance side-by-side with a camera that has a larger pixel size sensor that handles high ISO a bit more gracefully. Image stabilization on the SL3 is a 5-axis in-body system. What that means for everyday shooting is you can drop a 50mm f1.8 into your bag and still get sharp handheld shots at around 1/30th second, assuming you have a steady stance. I put it to the test walking through a museum with a 2470mm zoom and found that even with the occasional pause to frame a detail, the photos remained crisp. The stabilizer also benefits video work, giving you smoother handheld footage without a gimbal for run-and-gun style shoots. The downside is that the system adds a bit of lag when you switch to a lens that already has optical stabilization. The camera's IBIS and the lens's OIS can sometimes fight each other, which forces you to turn off one or the other for optimal results. If you rely heavily on lens-based stabilization, you'll need to be mindful of that interaction. Leica's lens ecosystem is famously curated, and that's both a blessing and a curse. The eye-mount lenses are renowned for their optical quality, and the lineup includes fast primes and versatile zooms that complement the high-resolution sensor nicely. However, the selection is still relatively small compared to the massive Sony E or Canon RF ecosystems. If you already own Leica eye-mount glass, the SL3 slots into that world seamlessly, and you'll notice the character these lenses bring to both stills and video. If